The economic dimensions of development and globalization were historically the foundation of all debates, discussions, agendas, policies, and programs. And this is understandable, given that economic growth is critical to development and a powerful force in globalization. In 2006, scholar Joseph Stiglitz gave the following definition of economic globalization. He defined economic globalization as the closer economic integration of the countries of the world through the increased flow of goods and services, capital, and labor. This week, we'll be looking specifically at the economic dimensions of development and globalization. And while most discussions in this area focus on formal economic activities, global economies extend beyond officially sanctioned transactions and interactions. So, building on the reading from last week on organ sales, we'll start with the seedy underbelly of the economic dimension of development and globalization by looking at shadow markets. When people hear the phrase shadow economy, they typically imagine businesses or individuals engaging in inappropriate practices without complying with certain legal obligations, such as paying taxes or maintaining acceptable standards of employment. A shadow economy is also known as the black market, hidden economy, the gray economy, the cash economy, the informal economy, the non observed economy, or the underground economy. By definition, a shadow economy refers to economic activities which are hidden from official authorities for monetary, regulatory, and or institutional reasons. The shadow economy is perhaps best described by the activities of those operating in it. It's work done for cash, where taxes generally aren't paid and regulations are not strictly followed. Activities that make up the global shadow economy or black market can include human trafficking, the sale of organs or body parts, as we saw in the reading for last week, narcotics, the sale of arms or weapons, exotic animals or pets, crude oil, prostitution, rum running, or it could be as simple as unlicensed cash work, undeclared work, or unregulated sales. In fact, most of the businesses operating in the shadow economy aren't what most people would think of as criminal enterprises. More typically, they include a worker driving an unlicensed taxi or an electrician accepting payments without declaring his or her earnings, unlicensed construction, or illegal sales by food vendors. And shadow economies do operate on a global scale. It's also sometimes the only choice for procuring goods in certain situations. Consider the following case. You're on an international vacation and you run out of formula for your baby. There's nothing available in local stores, and the only way to acquire baby formula is through a black market transaction. Would you make the purchase? Other times, it seems almost benign to make a shadow market purchase. What if you lived in a developing nation where life saving medicines were in short supply and often the only alternative to receive them is through the black market? If your mother needed medicine that could save her life, would you even hesitate to make the purchase? Or consider the situation where a single parent neighbor needs some help with childcare and offers to pay you $250 cash every week after school to watch her two children for an hour or so until she returns from work. Would you take the job? Most people participate in a shadow economy at some point throughout their lives. Shadow economies, however, cost nations trillions of dollars every year. And in addition, the size of this sector of the economy has grown significantly in some countries, especially among developing nations. As a percentage of GDP, the shadow economy ranges from 25 to 60% in South America and from 13 to 50% in Asia. Even among members of the OECD, the average size of the shadow economy is growing, as you can see in the table presented on this slide. For most OECD nations, the average of the shadow economy runs around 15%. However, for some European countries, the figure is as high as 21%, according to this report. The shadow economy can also economically link individual people from very different geocultural locations together in a very personal way. Take, for example, what's known as global care chains or global nanny chains. These chains can either be part of a regulated or shadow economy, but often they're part of both. Global care chains are defined as a series of personal links between people across the globe based on the work of caring, and they often involve women. The care chain usually begins in developed nations, where women have transitioned from unpaid care work, such as childcare, elder care, and sick care, to the paid labor force. This has left a need to fill caretaking roles in these developing nations. Therefore, women from developing nations have migrated to developed nations to take on this care work. Women who care for the young, sick, and old in their own poor countries move to care for the young, sick, and old in wealthier countries. These transnational workers often take positions as maids, nannies, daycare, or nursing home aides, and this creates an economic care chain that spreads across the globe. This movement to address care work creates gaps in all different types of communities and environments, and thus a chain is created to fill each of these gaps. A typical global care chain might work something like this. An older daughter from a poor family in a developing country must take care of her siblings. This is the first link in the chain. The daughter is taking care of her siblings so her mother can work as a nanny for a woman who has traveled abroad, the second link of the chain. The migrant woman, in turn, is caring for the child of a family in a developed country, and this is the final link in the chain. Each kind of chain expresses an invisible ecology of care, one care worker depending on another, and so on. A global care chain might start in a poor country and end in a rich one, or it might link rural and urban areas within the same country. A more complex version starts in a poor country and extends to a slightly less poor country and then to an even richer country. This movement to address care work creates gaps in all different types of communities and environments, and thus a chain is created to fill each of these gaps. A typical global care chain might work something like this. An older daughter from a poor family in a developing country must take care of her siblings. This is the first link in the chain. The daughter is taking care of her siblings so her mother can work as a nanny for a woman who has traveled abroad, the second link of the chain. The migrant woman, in turn, is caring for the child of a family in a developed country, and this is the final link in the chain. Each kind of chain expresses an invisible ecology of care, one care worker depending on another, and so on. A global care chain might start in a poor country and end in a rich one, or it might link rural and urban areas within the same country. A more complex version starts in a poor country and extends to a slightly less poor country and then to an even richer country. At times, care workers from developing nations can make a significant amount of money by traveling abroad and caring for a family in a developed nation. Women who have done care work abroad have sent their pay home to cover expenses like child care, housing, children's education, as well as the various everyday necessities of life. However, the cost can be great. Care workers are often separated from their own family for years at a time and often remark that they feel isolated, especially when living in a culture and country that's very different from their own.